Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Slingin Leather, Southern California's official combat sports show. And I am your host, Scuba Steve. Thank you all for tuning back in. And UFC 290 is finally in the books, ladies and gentlemen. And despite my awful picks for this fight card, this goes down as one of my absolute favorite events ever, ladies and gentlemen. Just some incredible performances up and down the fight card, an incredible complete night of fights from fight 1 all the way to fight 13. And we're going to give you guys a full recap of this fight card. There's so much to talk about. Starting off with some event statistics for this, there were 3 fighters that did remain undefeated post this fight card, those being Cameron Simon, Tatsuro Taira, and Bo Nickel. Two of them getting finishes, those being Simon and Nickel, and Tatsuro Taira winning a very good unanimous decision victory over Chaidez. And there were 2 fighters that did actually lose their undefeated records when competing in this fight card, those being Jasmine Jauregui and Val Woodburn. So some great performances and some very tough fights for some young fighters in the early going. And one factoid that really stood out to me once the UFC put this in during the broadcast, there were the most sub 1 minute finishes in a single fight card in the modern era. Since 2001, there has never been a fight card with 4 first round finishes within the first minute. And that just shows the incredible finishes we had on this. There was one fighter by the name of Jesus Aguilar that had an incredible right overhand knockout of Shannon Ross. I didn't pick that fight in advance. It was incredible to watch. I knew I was in for something special as soon as I saw him unload on Shannon like that. Big win for Jesus Aguilar, and a lot of big wins and a lot of big finishes. Out of the 13 fights we had in this card, there were 9 total finishes, and we are going to start with one of the biggest finishes of the night for a mixed martial arts legend, ruthless Robbie Lawler, going out and defeating Nico Price within 38 seconds of the first round, ladies and gentlemen. And I could not think of a better way for Robbie Lawler to wrap up his career. There have been so many veteran fighters as of late that have announced their retirement in advance of their last fight and have suffered some of the most vicious knockouts ever. One of them being Frankie Edgar getting flying kneed by Chris Gutierrez in his last fight. And it's never great to see. But Robbie Lawler came to fight. He said in the lead up to this, in the embedded episodes, that he didn't have the best fight camp. He didn't feel like himself for the majority. But on fight day, he said his feet felt great. And he said he felt that he was ready to go out there and compete. And compete he did, ladies and gentlemen. Despite Nico Price doing a great job in the early going of establishing a long distance and using some of his kicks, Lawler did a great job of quickly closing the distance, and as soon as he got a right collar tie over the neck of Nico Price, he unloaded a few uppercuts, a left hook, and that's all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen. Nico Price was down and out, and that gave Robbie Lawler a 38-second finish in his swan song, and just a huge week for the man in total. He had his fight against Rory McDonald at UFC 189 inducted into the UFC Fight Wing Hall of Fame. And just hearing him talk about this, you could hear his excitement, and you could tell that he was incredibly grateful for what mixed martial arts had gave him up until this point. And after this win, it really just showed that he really went out a way that many other fighters wish they could have. They played a beautiful tribute video for him after he got his finish, and just the biggest of congratulations to Robbie Lawler, and best of luck to him in his retirement. I could see him doing a great job coaching and potentially doing some great work behind the microphone as well. So just a humongous win for Robbie Lawler, and congrats to him. Best of luck in retirement. Couldn't have gone any better. So good to see. Next, we had Bo Nickel taking out Val Woodburn in the first round, ladies and gentlemen. And despite him getting a short notice replacement in Val Woodburn on this fight, Bo Nickel did exactly what he had to do, and that is go out and finish a short notice replacement of the caliber of Val Woodburn. Val Woodburn was an undefeated 7-0 fighter before coming into this fight and was seen to have some very good Muay Thai striking. However, it was really, really shown that the MMA community was not sold on Val Woodburn. The line on this fight, the betting line on this fight was just ridiculous. Plus 2,700 in favor of Bo Nickel, just showing that is a 270 to 1 shot for Val Woodburn to come out with the victory in this. And it really showed it from the outset. Bo Nickel did a good job of closing the distance, establishing his striking, and earned his second TKO victory of his career in just over Lawler's time in 39 seconds, and did a fantastic job. He's doing exactly what he has to do. He is one of the most high-profile prospects in the UFC, and once you come across matchups like this, although they may not raise your stake or raise your level in terms of the rankings or in terms of fighters' opinions around you, you have to take opportunities on short notice fights like these to make statements. And that is exactly what Bo Nickel did. He only had one other knockout finish in his career, and it was outside of Dana White's Contender Series and the UFC. It was in a smaller promotion. He was able to get a knockout victory and finally gets his first one in the UFC. Big one for him, and a huge, huge performance by Bo Nickel. It's going to be rather interesting to see what happens to Val Woodburn after this, if they're willing to give him another shot in the UFC after this. But after a quick drumming like that, it's really hard to see whether or not he's going to come back. Nickel didn't take any damage in this fight, so hopefully he will make a quick octagon return. And with him being the gamer like he is, with him having the work ethic that he does, it's really gonna be interesting to see whether or not he's going to be in next month, because he took 0 damage for this fight, or if anyone is willing to fight him in the next month. Bo Nickel has steamrolled all of his opponents so far, so that's going to be a tough fight to take for anybody. But hopefully he will make a quick return, and big win for Bo Nickel against an undefeated fighter. Next up, we had the fight that was going to be fight of the night if the co-main event didn't happen, with Dan Hooker edging out a split decision victory over Jalen Turner. And ladies and gentlemen, this was an absolute banger. These two came to fight. Not that Dan Hooker never doesn't come to fight. He always comes to fight. But these two went at it just spectacularly. Jalen Turner did a great job of controlling the action in round 1 and did a great job of being the sniper that he is, picking his spots, waiting for the openings, and Dan Hooker, being the dog that he is, was able to take some huge shots in the first round of this fight, and he hurt Hooker in several exchanges. But despite this, halfway through the second round, you could really see Jalen Turner starting to gas out, and Dan Hooker really starting to put on the pace. Dan Hooker had constant forward motion in this fight, and he really did a great job of using that to tire Turner out by the end of the second round. And by the end of the second round, Dan Hooker's blonde hair was completely pink with his own blood. He had an injury in the second round. We'll talk about this later. And despite this, came in and kept the pressure going and beat Jalen in the third round, and just had an incredibly tough performance, and really shows the resolve and the toughness that Dan Hooker possesses. It's very much cowboy Tony Ferguson like. He has that Tony Ferguson type of toughness, because after this fight, it was revealed that he had suffered a broken arm and a broken orbital by the third round of this fight. And despite that, he goes out and wins it. And just an incredible performance for Dan Hooker. He truly looked like a Tony Ferguson type of scrapper, or a Nate Diaz type of scrapper in this fight, where he is willing to take shots to give them. And just an incredible display of resolve and overcoming adversity for Hooker. Not to mention the adversity he was holding for the disgusting tattoos that he got in the gap between his previous and his fight this past weekend. I couldn't take my eyes off him. He's got a Shogun on the back of his back, and 2 tribal tattoos on his shins that look like cowboy boots. And despite looking ridiculous, plus the blonde hair, he was able to look like an absolute bad dude throughout this fight. And just a huge display of his toughness. He went out and did an interview with the Mac Life 2 days later in an arm sling and in a pair of sunglasses to cover up his injuries. and just talking about the fight like it was nothing. He said his own broken arm was a scratch in the middle of the octagon, which just shows the type of guy you're talking about when you're talking about Dan Hooker. A huge win for him. He's probably going to take a long layoff just based on the damage he took in this fight. A broken arm and broken orbital will take a while to heal, but it's really going to secure him another top 15 fight once he comes back. Huge win for Dan Hooker, and all the credit to him. All the credit in the world goes out to him with just how tough he showed that he was in this fight. Next, we have the upset of the night, ladies and gentlemen. I did not see this coming. I thought Robert Whittaker over Dricus du Plessis was going to be a deadlock in this, considering how good Robert has looked and how I dubbed him as the best middleweight in the world, not named Israel Adesanya. And this was just the statement of statements by Dricus du Plessis. One of the biggest storylines going into this fight week was the surgery he had on his nose. Previously, his nose was only taking in 8% of the possible oxygen that it could, meaning he was gassing out in his previous fights significantly due to his inability to breathe through his nose. And I would have never thought that this made the difference that it did, but Dricus looked like the volume fighter that we've never seen him look like. He put it on Bobby Knuckles in a way that we've never seen. His gas tank looked completely refreshed. He was starting the exchanges and ending the exchanges with Robert and did a great job of never allowing Robert to get his rhythm going. Robert is always a slow starter, but once it comes to the second, third, fourth, and fifth round, mind you, this is only a 3-round fight, he turns it on and gains his rhythm and is able to find his openings. Dricus never allowed this to happen and looked like a world title contender while doing it. So, not only this, he had all this volume striking while having some incredible power behind his shots. He looks like a tiny Mark Coleman in there. He looks ginormous, and it really showed with how much power some of his shots were landing against Robert. So just huge statement victory for him. And after this fight, we were treated with one of the most awkward and one of the most controversial face-offs in the ring that we've ever seen. Ever since Brock Lesnar shoved DC in the octagon, we've never seen anything like this. Israel Adesanya came into the octagon completely hammered out of his mind and faced off with Dricus and started hurling insults at him, calling him his African brother, using a certain racial slur that is tied towards black people, and was making a rather malicious side of himself come to light. And Dricus did a rather good job of remaining composed and not getting too emotionally invested in the moment. And after Izzy called him his African brother, and finally after Dricus was able to speak, he said one of the most calm and truthful responses, saying, "I may be African, but I'm no brother of yours." And credit to Dricus for handling such an awkward situation pretty well. In the grand scheme of this is not going to go well. I think this is going to make the build-up for the eventual fight between Adesanya and Dricus be about being comparably malicious to that of Conor versus Khabib. Conor and Khabib had one of the most malicious and one of the most cold-cut, hateful rivalries in combat sports history, let alone the UFC, let alone mixed martial arts. One of the most heated and most bad-tempered rivalries in mixed martial arts. In sports history. And I don't see this going any other way. Izzy is known for his talking ability, although it may be cringy at times. He is going to come at Dricus for the comments he's made about Dricus saying he's the true African fighter, him being from South Africa, and Izzy taking umbrage with these comments. I think this is going to leave a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of fans. And at the end of the day, despite Israel Adesanya being a cage fighter and being in a business that's not really being marketed towards kids, you are still being an example. You're still leading by example for the future mixed martial artists of the world. You are showing them indirectly what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And by coming out and going after Dricus the way he did, it looked terrible for Izzy. And despite him having the platform of being the middleweight champion and being able to say whatever he wants, and despite much worse things being said in the octagon, he still has to lead by example. And a lot of outlets are saying this. Notably, Josh Thompson from the Weighing In podcast believes that he did a poor job of setting himself up as an example for young mixed martial artists. So, despite the huge win for Dricus du Plessis, this is only going to add more excitement for his eventual matchup against Israel Adesanya. Huge win for him. Huge win against the second best middleweight in the world, in my opinion, and doing it in incredible fashion. Second round TKO. Couldn't ask for a better performance from Dricus du Plessis. And ladies and gentlemen, the co-main event. My God, this co-main event was absolutely spectacular. Alessandro Pantoja and Brandon Moreno put together one of the highest level mixed martial arts fights I have ever personally witnessed. And this was just complete mayhem. From their exchanges on the feet to their exchanges on the ground, both men had their moments, and both men showed that they were very well versed in both facets of fighting. And Alessandro Pantoja was able to get this split decision victory by way of his ground control time, by his way of taking Brandon down and holding him there. Despite Brandon having three reversals which he turned into great opportunities to lay down ground and pound and to mount his own offense, Alessandro Pantoja did a great job of controlling the majority of this fight. Brandon won this second round and won the fourth round, in my opinion, but 1, 3, and 5 really showed how Alessandro, once he starts the round well, he's able to finish strong. In the fifth round, all he had to do, he was... In my opinion, it was 2-2. As soon as he took Moreno's back, he knew that if he just stayed there, the fight was his. And there's no real way to give Moreno the fifth round, considering there was not enough offense thrown. And despite Alessandro failing to get the rear naked choke after getting the human backpack, it really showed that he did just enough to beat the champion. And a huge congratulations to Alessandro Pantoja. And I know what you're thinking, ladies and gentlemen. This is our third fight, Steve. This is our third fight. This is probably it, right? We're going to see Pantoja fight Royval, and if he beats Royval, we're going to it'll be the end of this. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't care. That was one of the highest expressions of mixed martial arts I have ever had the personal pleasure of seeing. I have to have a fourth. I need to see it. I don't care if we just got off a quadrilogy between Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo. It doesn't matter. The flyweight division has produced some of the most high-level mixed martial arts in title fights that we've ever seen in recent years. Brandon's quadrilogy with Davison Figueiredo was one of the most high expressions of mixed martial arts, and somehow this fight managed to surpass everything that they did. I still can't get over the exchange between Moreno and Figueiredo, where Figueiredo had Brandon in a guillotine, was bringing him to the ground. Brandon slips out, hits him with an ankle pick, ends back on top. They scramble, and then they end up back on the feet. It was like that, but for 5 rounds. 5 rounds of complete chaos. Some of the highest level chaos I've ever seen. But just an incredible fight to watch. Me and my Uncle Joe, shout out to my Uncle Joe, were going absolutely bananas during this fight. And we both had Moreno going in this fight. We both love Brandon and everything that he represents about mixed martial arts. But Pantoja did just a fantastic job. And I can't wait to see what happens next from the flyweight division. And not to discredit any of the most stacked divisions in the UFC, whether it's bantamweight, lightweight, or featherweight. Flyweight has had some of the most competitive and the most high-level championship fights in the last 5 years, and I just cannot wait to see if they book this rematch immediately, or Brandon's going to go after rematch Kai Kara France, or fight Brandon Royval, or someone else in the flyweight division that's itching for a fight. It has to happen eventually. This has to happen eventually. That fight was too dang close, and depending on how you look at it, depending on if you favor the striking of Moreno more or the ground control of Pantoja more, this fight could have gone either way theoretically. And for the fans, they got to do this one for the fans, and I cannot wait to see the fourth. I don't think anyone would be upset about a fourth, despite people being upset about the fourth Davis and Figueiredo fight. The first two fights between Pantoja and Moreno occurred 5+ years ago. And since then, Pantoja admitted that Brandon got so much better. We have to see this fight again because Brandon is legitimately capable of beating Pantoja, in my opinion. I think this is another Izzy and Pereira type of situation where Izzy showed that he had the mettle to beat Alex, just never really got the opportunity to show that. So Brandon is in a very good spot still. I think he really showed his own high-level skill in this fight and his own ability to make a fight against a guy he's already lost to twice ridiculously close. So huge credit to these two. Thank you to Alessandro Pantoja, and a huge congratulations on securing the championship. And a huge thank you to Brandon Moreno, and despite the loss, a huge congratulations on him showcasing his talent, on giving me one of the greatest fights I've ever had the pleasure of watching. If you guys haven't seen it, once this thing comes out on ESPN+, get some popcorn, get some soda, get some beer, and sit down and watch it. It is fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. And we haven't even gotten to the main event. The main event really reaffirmed a few things in my mind. It was Volk's complete and utter domination in several facets en route to a third-round TKO victory. And Yair was saying a lot of the right things coming up in this fight. He felt grateful to be in this position, and he wanted to, stay calm and come after Alex methodically. However, when you watch Volk fight, there's no opportunity. There's no breathing room. Alexander Volkanovski puts a pace on you like anybody else, and it showed that in his approach. Alex initially wasn't really standing with Yair in the pocket. He did a great job of taking the fight to the ground and ensuring that he was winning rounds early and also getting some huge shots off in ground and pound. However, by the end of the fight, you saw Volk standing with Yair and, coming in from the outside and closing distance in incredible fashion and really spelled danger for Yair after he got knocked down and finished. Alexander Volkanovski looked so fantastic in this fight, and it just shows what kind of talent you're dealing with when you're talking about Alexander Volkanovski. You're talking about a GSP. You're talking about a John Jones. You're talking about those guys that have that grappling and they're striking at an equilibrium where they can just as effectively strike with an opponent as they could take them down and keep them there and potentially submit him. Alexander has looked so good, and I have been uncomplimentary of Alex throughout his career, considering he beat one of my absolute favorites in Max Holloway. And in the second fight, which I legitimately thought he lost, and a lot of people legitimately thought he lost, I have never been the most complimentary of Alexander Volkanovski. But this fight really showed where he's at. No one's taking him out. No one's taking him out at 145. I don't care if Arnold Allen looks 10 times better. I really don't think he's going to have the gas tank to beat Alexander. I don't think Josh Emmett, just after his previous loss and everything that's happened in between, I just don't think he is going to be able to do it. Even Ilia Topuria, one of the guys that they are saying is going to give Volk the hardest shot, I don't think he's going to have the power to make it a huge difference. Volk used to be 210 pounds at 5'6". I don't know how he keeps his chin at 145, but he's been hit with bigger shots before and stayed up. That head kick with Max dropped him when it would have knocked out lesser foes, and it would have spelled the end for them. But at this point, he's too good. He tied Max for his title defenses. They're both at 5. One more, and he ties Jose Aldo, the greatest featherweight of all time. If he surpasses, I don't know how we can't consider him the greatest featherweight to ever do it. And despite him potentially going up to 155 to fight Islam again, considering he doesn't have a fight at 155, I think he could do very well. A lot of people say he won that fight too. And that establishes him as the pound-for-pound best. The pound-for-pound rankings isn't just based on skills. It's not based on how good your division is. It's not based on any of these X's and O's. It's based on your level of victory, the pedigree that your victories carry. And there's no one in the UFC that has his pedigree of victories. Say what you will about John Jones. I love John Jones. I think he's the GOAT. But in the last 5 years, He's had farcical opponents in terms of title contention and how they were able to compete against him in comparison to Alexander Volkanovski. He has far surpassed anyone in the UFC in terms of his level of victories, and I think this definitively gives him the number one pound for pound spot in the world. But that's just my opinion, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really curious to see what you guys think of this event. Leave a comment down below. Also, leave a comment letting me know what types of videos you guys would like to see in the future. I would love to hear what you guys have to say, and I'm certainly interested in that. Also, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more episodes of Southern California's official combat sports show. This has been Slingin' Leather. I am Scuba Steve, and we will see you guys in the next one.